I am somewhat convinced that there is not a couple alive who really understands how much planning and work and effort goes into a wedding until they're in the midst of it. How are we doing, Abby? Are we getting through it? All right, good. Good. There is so many things that go into making your special day that I had never considered before. Things that I didn't know I had an opinion on until Mandy was asking me what my opinion was on that sort of thing. Things like what type of font to put on the wedding invitations. What sort of color scheme should you go with? What type of shoes should the flower girl be wearing when she walks out? Things that I had never thought of before and haven't thought of since. But there's just so many little details and little things that some couples, they'll take years in things. In fact, I've heard a time or two of ladies who have been planning the wedding long before who the groom was going to be. There's just so much that goes into all of that. But for Mandy and I, when we got engaged, we didn't want to wait years before we got married. Mandy and I got engaged in December of 2008, and we knew that we wanted to get married sometime in the calendar year of 2009. Found some way to convince Mandy to marry me after our first date in July of 2007, but, you got to lock that down. Something you may not know about my wife, though, is that her all-time favorite season of the year is fall. Mandy hates summer, so this week in particular has been very difficult for her. I am also someone who hates summer. This is the 1 week out of the year where I really consider shaving my beard. I fought the urge. Gentlemen, we can power through and we can continue to grow our magnificence. Paul's with me at least. All right. But here's the thing. So she wanted to get married in the fall, and preferably she wanted to get married that October. But when we got into the grand scheme of planning out our wedding, we kind of ran into our first roadblock. At the time, Mandy was living in an apartment building, and so her apartment lease was to end the end of May. She was hoping to just extend that lease about 3 more months, so that way we could get married in the beginning of October. But her landlord said it's 12 or it's nothing. And I have this weird thing about me. I don't want to spend a year paying for something that I'm not going to use. So when Mandy came to me and she shared with me this dilemma of how she really wanted to get married, she didn't want to sign a 12-month lease. And realistically, she didn't want to move back in with her parents for just a short term because that would be moving twice in a short period of time. She didn't want to handle that. So I said, well, when does your lease expire? And she told me it expires on Sunday, May 31st. I said, okay, well, the easiest solution that I can see is that we get married on Saturday, May the 30th. It wasn't the plan that we had hoped for, but hey, the end result was we were getting married sooner, so I was in favor of that. And she was okay with that as well, and so that's what we did, meaning that we only had months to plan what some people take 2 to 5 years to plan. Oh boy. So I'm kind of a linear thinker. I try to prioritize whenever I'm planning anything out. So we started with what's most important. And we came up with the first 3 most important things. That would be the where, what time, and who. So we thought about the where. Okay, where are we going to have this sort of thing? We kind of bounced some ideas back and forth, but ultimately we landed on the church that I was working for at the time. And we landed on the church that I was working for at the time for a very important reason. It was free. So that took care of that. When was kind of a short discussion for us. I kind of thought that if we scheduled our wedding for 3 o'clock in the afternoon, then that would mean that everybody who came to our wedding would have already eaten lunch, and that they would naturally want to leave when it got close to dinner so we could save a little money on the catering. You call it cheap, I call it frugal. So that just left the who, and who was going to be the members of our wedding party. And an overly large wedding party because we just, don't have that many friends. But also we just felt that having more people just makes things more complicated. So we left things relatively small. For bridesmaids, Mandy chose her cousin Lauren, who had been a part of her life, her entire life. They'd been really tight. Even though they were cousins, they acted like sisters. She picked her best friend Katrina, who was actually the person that introduced Mandy and I. So that was kind of fun. And I still think she should have put more thought into this, but for her maid of honor, she landed on her twin sister, Randy. I mean, you guys did everything together. Couldn't you have one thing that Randy wasn't involved with? But they were womb mates. Anyway, but for my groomsmen, I kind of inadvertently went for extreme opposites in Greg and Brian. My buddy Greg had been going bald since he was 14 years old. When you're in your 20s and you're already naturally bald, just shave the whole thing off, go for the Stone Cold Steve Austin. Why wouldn't you? And my buddy Brian at the time was, well, still to this day, is blessed with the gift of follicle advancement. And he was growing out his hair for locks of love and naturally growing out his beard, because if you're going to grow out your hair, you might as well grow out the beard too. And he bared a remarkable resemblance to nearly every portrait of Jesus you've ever seen in your life. It was actually, out of the entire wedding party, it would be the best man that would be the most complicated. Not the who. I knew exactly who I wanted to be my best man for really most of my life. Adam and I had been tight buddies really since we were born. I mean, we'd always been around each other. His mom and my mom worked together. We attended the same church together. In fact, every Sunday it was kind of an ongoing discussion as to which one of each other's houses we were going to go to between church and youth group. We just always spent time together. We had been through so much that life had thrown at us that it was natural for me to select Adam Purvis as my best man. There was a small problem, though. Adam wasn't in the country, and he was not supposed to be back in the United States until July of 2009. He was doing a year-long mission trip in Israel. And so I knew that the chances of my best friend being able to stand beside me on the most important day of my life were slim to none. When I was finally able to call him, because for that year we couldn't really talk to each other very much because, time differences, and it was really expensive still at that time. You had things like roaming, so I couldn't just call him anytime I wanted to. When I finally was able to get a hold of him, I told him that I knew what the situation was. But as I was waiting to call him, I came up with this idea. I thought, what if we could have Adam do this new thing called Skype? We could have him as a laptop on a pedestal next to me. I had worked out this whole idea that when the minister would ask for the rings, that Adam would bring a small box up to the corner of there, and I would reach behind there and grab the actual ring. I even thought it might be kind of funny to have Randy walking a laptop down the aisle. I thought that could be a lot of fun for everybody. So when I finally got in touch with my best friend in the whole world at that time, I said, man, here's the thing. The only date that works for us is May 30th, and I know that means that you're not going to be that far when Adam said, hey, let me call you back, and hung up the phone. Initially, I thought, hey, something was going on. I mean, I know this particular part of the world is not exactly known for long stretches of peace, so I thought, oh no, what if something had happened? Maybe it was just something as simple as a friend or a roommate needed his attention for that moment, and it would be 45 minutes of trying to figure out, why did Adam hang up on me before he would call me back? And when he called me back, he said, I got my ticket. Be there. And he was. Look at those dorks. Yeah, my little baby beard. This dude flew in on a Thursday morning, came to my bachelor party Thursday night, was at the wedding rehearsal on Friday, did the wedding on Saturday, and flew back to Israel Sunday morning. It cost him roughly $2,000 to be at my wedding. But he told me there wasn't a chance he was going to miss it. He was going to be there for me on my biggest day. He has gone down, I think, in history as the most jet-lagged best man of all time. My uncle, who lived in Michigan at the time, he came up to me during the reception and he said, so do I win the award for having come the furthest distance to be here? I went, you're not even close, bro. His best, it was there, but in his defense, he was trying not to pass out during the best man speech. But it meant the world to me that my buddy sacrificed so much to just be at my wedding. It meant everything that he was there. 5 years later or so, Adam finally found the right girl for him, a beautiful wife by the name of Lauren, and the two of them decided to get married. And they just chose to get married for, I still don't understand, in West Virginia. Now, the reason I don't understand it is Lauren, yes, had lived in West Virginia for a short period of time in her life, but at this point when they got married, literally all of Adam's family and her parents and brothers and sisters were all living in Indiana. He's never fessed up to it, but I think that it's because he wanted to get some measure of revenge on me. Because at that point in time, that was after all the plane ticket prices. So I think he was trying to balance things out. But here's the thing, I wasn't going to miss it. I was going to be right there for him, to stand next to him on the biggest day of his life. When the minister asked for the ring, I handed him a ring pop because I just had to. So, you know. My favorite thing is that it was an Incredible Hulk ring pop too. So I handed it to Adam. He just looked at it and went, no. He told me afterwards he knew I was going to do something because, pretty well. But for both of us to be at that moment in the biggest point of either one of our lives, there was no chance that we were going to miss it. We were going to take that cost and we were going to say, forget it. I'm going to be there for him because he means that much to me and I apparently mean that much to him. Friendship is an interesting element in our lives. It's kind of an element that if you think about it on the surface, it doesn't make a lot of sense. You find somebody one day, I'm going to hang out with them, and that's just it. You guys go and do stuff together. But we have friends who enter our lives either through chance or design and just become woven into the fabric of our lives. They become kind of chosen family members. They become more than friends for us. In friendships, like in every other relationship that we have, there are times where it's not always easy. We face times in our lives where we need the support. We just need our friends to be there. When we're facing difficult times in our lives, when our job has just called us and said we're out, when we're not sure what's going to happen, when our wife is facing complications in her pregnancy, when we're dealing with stuff that is too heavy for us to carry on our own, the first people that we always call are the friends that mean the most to us. And we recognize that sometimes in friendship it becomes sort of a cost to us. It may not always be a financial cost, but it is a cost of time and effort and energy and just really anything else that we need. But when the friendship is genuine, when we genuinely care about this particular person, we will see that there is a cost associated with remaining in this friendship, and we'll say, I don't care, because they're worth it. I will sacrifice that time. I will sacrifice that energy. I will sacrifice, sometimes that money in order to be there for my friend when they need me most. And we know that they make that sacrifice for us, but when the friendship is genuine, both sides don't care. But I'll be willing to bet that, like me, you have had some friendships in your life that were a little more one-sided. You have that friend who needed you to be there for them in a moment, and you were right there. You couldn't wait to be there for them. You sacrificed all that time, that effort, that energy, that cost to be there for them with you. But when you needed them, all of a sudden their schedule just couldn't allow it. They had too many balls in the air, or their phone just kept going to voicemail. Understand this is a devastating moment when you realize what you thought was a genuine friendship was really just one person taking advantage of you. Was taking your time, your effort, your energy, and they were not willing to reciprocate that to bring balance back to those scales. Because they were never really your friend to begin with. It is a difficult thing to make that realization that when there is this one-sided friendship, it's not actually friendship. But when friendship is genuine, the cost does not matter. Because we know that at some point in time, those scales are going to come back into some sense of balance. And I don't think that there is a better example of true, genuine, I'll even throw the word biblical friendship than in today's dynamic duo. And I find myself at a bit of an awkward moment for myself. I'm going to pull the curtain back a little bit. I actually put a lot of planning behind these things. I don't know if you know that or not. I know oftentimes it doesn't look like that. I like to say that I worked very hard to make it look like I didn't work at all. But the elders can tell you this. I shared with them in January, and so they knew in January that around about this time we were going to be talking about this particular dynamic duo. Brad didn't know that when he came to give his sermon. And Brad talked about this particular dynamic duo. And here's the thing, kid knocked it out of the park, so I don't want to step on his toes. I don't want to rehash anything that he did because I think he did an incredible job in delivering his message about David and Jonathan. But there is a story. There is something further for us to look at in this particular relationship. And so if you weren't here for that Sunday, or if you are unfamiliar with this narrative in the first place, then let me kind of recount a little bit about the story of David and Jonathan, so that way we're at least starting off with a place of better context. And by now you know I really love I think it's important. David and Jonathan met shortly after one of the most famous moments of David's young life. After David killed Goliath, which is just a fun sentence to start off with, right? After David killed Goliath, he was brought into the home of Saul, the king of Israel at that time. In 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 1, we read, as soon as he had finished speaking, he being David, to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul. These two became instantaneous friends. They had just met. They're having one conversation with each other, and Jonathan decides, yep, that's my best friend now. You ever get that with somebody? I've had it one time. You guys may remember several months ago I had my friend Cody come up here and preach for you guys. I refer to him as Beef. Don't ask about how he got the nickname. The story's not nearly as interesting as the nickname itself. But Beef and I met becoming our youth groups to Summer in the Sun at Kentucky Christian University at the same time. One day the main event session was running super duper late, and I usually played a fun little game of who's going to be my friend. So I scanned the room looking for somebody to talk with to kill the time, and I met Beef. And we immediately hit it off to the point that now no longer in my life can I play who's going to be my friend, because I'll just wind up thinking you're nothing like Beef, and therefore I don't want to deal with you. We just sort of instantly clicked. But David and Jonathan sort of have this same experience, that there is something that just resonates within them, that they are going to be best friends forever. And everything was going really well for them until Saul got really jealous of David and decided that we needed to make David a little less alive than what he is right now, even to the point of throwing some spears at David. And Jonathan at first was kind of reluctant to believe that his father wanted his best friend killed, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I remember having some friends that my father was less than pleased that I was friends with, but I don't think he actively tried to murder any of them. I don't know, I'll have to ask him. And yet that's what's going on here. When Jonathan actually does learn, in fact, that yes, this is for real, things get kind of hairy. And eventually Jonathan thinks that Saul has worked his way out of it, but they decide to come up with a test for it. They make this test that the festival of the new moon, David is expected to be there, but he's going to skip out on it. And if Saul gets to the point where he's like okay with David being not there, cool, everything is settled down, we can get back to life as normal. But if Saul is not happy that David's not there, well, then that means this is for real. Jonathan is going to be able to get a first-hand experience to see exactly how far things have gone between him and his father. And sure enough, at the festival of the new moon, Saul recognizes David, and he gets furious. And like we often do sometimes, he directs some of that anger towards Jonathan, claiming that his son has chosen sides with his enemy. Jonathan recognizes that David needs to go, that he's got to run. He's got to do everything that he can to hide. But that also means that in all likelihood, Jonathan will never see his friend again. If David runs, I'm never going to get to see my buddy again. But if he stays, my dad's going to kill him. What a fun conundrum, don't you think? In 1 Samuel chapter 20, verses 41 and 42, we show their final moments with each other. It says, "And as soon as the boy had gone inside the stone heap and fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. They kissed one another and wept with one another, David weeping the most. And then Jonathan said to David, 'Go in peace, because we have sworn both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord shall be between me and you, and between my offspring and your offspring forever.' He rose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city." In all likelihood, Jonathan knew this was going to be his last moment with his best friend. Can you even begin to fathom that realization of recognizing that this conversation with my friend is the last one we are ever going to have? I think in the world that we live in today, that's really hard for us to genuinely understand, right? I mean, if I want to talk to my friend, it doesn't matter if he's next door or next country over. I can just hop on the phone. We can FaceTime each other. We can have a conversation that'll go on for hours. We don't actually physically have to be in the same room together to maintain the relationship, to maintain the friendship, to still consider each other to be our best friends. Right now, Adam lives in Illinois. I live over here. We talked the other day. It went for like an hour and a half. I'm sure the next time we talk, it'll go for about the same. But to know is you're never going to be able to speak to that friend again. You're never going to be able to see him. You're never going to be able to make those fun inside jokes that the two of you have been sharing for years. It has to be heartbreaking, right? But Jonathan understood something. He understood that God had a bigger plan for David. That God had something David than just the here and the now. And so even though it was difficult, even though it meant that his closest friend in the world was not going to be able to be around him anymore, Jonathan thought, you know what, it's at least better to know he's still alive. And so Jonathan sacrificed. He sacrificed the time that he would spend with his friend, knowing that something better lay ahead for him. Not too long after this little drama, though, both Saul and Jonathan would be killed in battle. The people of Israel would institute David as the new king. They would bring him to become the new leader of Israel. All of a sudden, David went from being the most hunted man in the country to being the country. And after a period of time, after David had kind of taken care of some of the enemies of Israel and brought about the first real glimpse of peace in the nation that they'd ever really experienced, you would think that at that point in time, David's mind would be focused on, I can breathe now. I can let it go. All this tension of being chased after by the most powerful man in the country, that's over. All of our enemies have been held at bay. We can finally take a deep breath. Its head would be. But I'm not David. Because in 2 Samuel chapter 9, verse 1, we are shown exactly what was on the mind of David. It was his friend. We read, and David said, is there still anyone left of the house of Saul, that I may show him kindness for Jonathan's sake? How long, but at this point in time, Jonathan has likely been dead for at least a few years. But David missed him. He missed his friend. And he decided that if there was still anyone connected to Jonathan, if there was anybody who was still of the same family of Jonathan, that David wanted to show them kindness because of Jonathan, because of that connection because of the friendship that they shared. Again, the word described it as being two souls knit together. Because of that connection that they shared, he wanted to show kindness to anyone from the line of Jonathan, simply because he missed Jonathan. The people there brought to David a servant by the name of Ziba, who had been a servant of Saul as well. And in verse 3 it says, the king said to him, is there not still someone of the house of Saul, that I may show the kindness of God to him? And Ziba said to the king, there is still a son of Jonathan. He is crippled in his feet. We've discussed here several times now, to the point that you probably already know this, but in this culture and in this time period, to live with any sort of a physical disability, it meant that your life was going to be difficult. But for this particular young man, he had been at least born to royalty, right? Meaning that he was at least provided for. Of his life for somebody who was dealing with a physical disability at a time where most people needed to physically work in order to provide for themselves. At the very least, he didn't have to worry about provision because he came from the line of Saul. And then Saul got killed. And then his family was removed as the royal family. His entire life has completely upended itself. And now all of a sudden, this young man is struggling more so than he's ever struggled before in his life. And yet David, the king, the friend of Jonathan, has heard that this young man is alive and well. And so David summons the young man, a young man by the name of Mephibosheth, which is yet another great name for a pet. I just had this vision this week of, these are my two dogs. This is Elimelech and this is Mephibosheth. Right? Be pretty great. But Mephibosheth is brought to stand before the king. And if I'm Mephibosheth in this moment, this has to be at least a little bit scary, right? Mephibosheth himself may not know about the friendship of his father and David. He may not know about the connection that these two shared. But I mean, he is the presumed line of Saul, right? And I don't know if you know how a monarchy system works, but typically in a monarchy system, if the king dies, the next in line becomes king. Right? Wouldn't that be great to only be mad at one family your entire life every 4 years? Be fantastic. But there is a scenario where Mephibosheth himself should have been made king over Israel, and now the new king is asking him to come stand before him. There has to be at least some part of Mephibosheth's mind that is saying, what if this dude just wants to wipe me out as a possible contender to the throne, to solidify his own reign? And so when Mephibosheth does come to the king, he does something that makes a lot of sense in this moment, and we see it in verses 6 and 7. It says, and Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, son of Saul, came to David and fell on his face and paid homage. The first thing Mephibosheth does is instantly recognize that David is the superior here. He humbles himself in front of the king. Man, this next part has got to shock him entirely. David said, Mephibosheth! That's how I picture how he said it, right? Real excited, real big. And Mephibosheth answered, behold, I am your servant. And David said to him, do not fear, for I will show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land of Saul your father, and you shall eat at my table. I love this word. You want to talk about a reversal of fortune, right? For Mephibosheth, this one particular moment, standing in front of this new king, what started off as fear has just turned into rejoicing. What started off as, oh man, I'm probably going to die, has just turned to, my life has been restored better than what it was. Right? Because by David giving him all of the land of Saul, Saul was the king, man. Kings aren't exactly known for having just a little tiny plot, a half acre. So this means that he is going to have financial stability in his life. He is going to be provided for because that land is going to get worked, because that land is going to be taken care of, and that's going to put more money in Mephibosheth's pocket, meaning that all of the struggle that he has had the last couple of years since his father and his grandfather have died, that's gone because of this one particular moment. But even more than that, he has been invited to sit at the table of the king always. That is restored honor. The struggle of having to be a person with a physical debility in this culture and in this time period, that's gone now. Because David has decided that he's going to treat Mephibosheth as if he was his own child, simply because of who his dad was. Understand, David is taking on a huge expense here, right? He is giving up what is rightfully his own land. As the new king of Israel, what once was Saul's is now David's. And so he is purposefully giving up profit in order to benefit Mephibosheth. Those fields were going to produce for the next generations to come. He is giving all of that up. More than that, he is inviting Mephibosheth to come and be a part of his family. And that means that a person with physical disabilities, they're going to need care. They're going to need provision. They're going to need food. They're going to need water. They're going to need everything that it takes to live. There are going to be surprise expenses that come alongside of this. Any person who has dealt with physical disabilities or has a family member with disabilities can tell you, surprises come. And they can get expensive really quickly. Now, David is the king of Israel. I imagine that he can probably handle this. But there is still going to be a lot of money spent on the care of this one person. But even more than that, everyone in Israel knew that Saul didn't like David. Right? The king doesn't go chasing after somebody and the people don't find out about it. In the grandson of a hated enemy to come and live with him, this doesn't make any sense. So David is not only going to lose out on money, he's going to lose political clout over this entire situation. This is going to be a huge cost to David. But he doesn't care. Because to him, the cost of everything is worth it. Because of the friendship that he shared with him, it doesn't matter that this is what is going to cost him. Jonathan sacrificed everything so that David could live. The least David could do is to treat Mephibosheth like his own son. And the second half of chapter 20, verse 11 tells us, so Mephibosheth ate at David's table. I love this. Like one of the king's sons. Every friendship requires a sense of mutual sacrifice. And it has to come from both sides. There is a give and take element to every relationship that we have in our lives, and friendship is the same. There are moments where that is going to remain unbalanced, where a friend is going to do something for you, and it's going to take a while before those scales get back. And yet most of the time, for almost all of us, we consider that cost to be worth it if we genuinely care about that friendship. It is up to us to decide, do I care enough about this person that I'm willing to take on the cost of time and effort and energy and, yeah, sometimes money. But most of the time, if we genuinely care about that person, it's always worth it. Adam considered what it was going to take for him to be at my wedding to be worth it. I considered the cost of being at Adam's wedding to be worth it, to be there for him. Jonathan felt the weight of not being able to be around David, but considered it to be worth it if it meant that David was still alive. David didn't consider all the cost associated with the care of Mephibosheth because of how much Jonathan had meant to him. When friendship is genuine, the cost is always worth it. There is a colloquialism that we like to use here in the church. It's not one that is like always front and center, but it is one that I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with, and it's the title, Friend of God. It is this notion that because of our connection with Jesus, that we are more than followers of him, that we are his friends, and it is birthed out of what Jesus said to his disciples in John chapter 5. Disciples, no longer do I call you servants, for the servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. It's a beautiful thing to consider that Jesus would look at us and call us friends, is it not? A friendship relationship is so much more deeper, so much more intimate than a servanthood relationship. And Jesus refers to us as his friends, and of the friendship that he has for us, of the cross. He would willingly sacrifice so that we could be restored to the of sin. He looked at that cost. He said, worth it. But in every friendship, there are two sides. And if every friendship requires a sense of mutual sacrifice, then it stands to reason that there will be a cost on our. The verse before, verse this, he said, you are my friends if you do what I command. Truth is, following Jesus will have a cost to it. Salvation is absolutely no mistake of that, but to genuinely follow after Jesus, to be considered a friend of Jesus, it may have a cost of sacrificing what we want, of sacrificing what we believe is right, or of what he says is right. Yes. Some relationships that we know we should not have. Understand, we will never be able to fully balance out the scale of what Jesus has done for us. It's impossible. For the entirety of eternity, we will never be able to bring balance to that. With Jesus hasn't cost us anything. If it hasn't led to anything, then I think we are forced to ask ourselves the question, are we really a friend? The verse before, verse 14, in John 15, verse 13, Jesus would say this to his followers. He would tell us the true cost of friendship, and we will close with it. Greater love has no one than this, when someone lay down his life for his friends.